She was released from the hospital a day early, and when she came home she saw her husband and his lover in her bed. The sight should have destroyed her. 12 years of marriage, 12 years of trust, 12 years of building a life together, all shattered in the space of a heartbeat. But instead of screaming, instead of throwing things, instead of falling apart like any normal person would, Sophia Sterling stood frozen in her bedroom doorway and felt something cold and calculating settle into her chest. Robert didn't see her. Neither did the woman beneath him, a redhead Sophia didn't recognize, her pale legs wrapped around Robert's waist as he moved against her with the same rhythm he'd once reserved for his wife. They were too lost in their passion to notice the hospital bracelet still on Sophia's wrist, too consumed by their betrayal to hear her car in the driveway, too selfish to remember that she was supposed to be coming home tomorrow. The woman's moans filled the room that Sophia had decorated with such care. The same room where she and Robert had talked about having children, where they'd made love on their wedding night, where she'd nursed him through the flu just 3 months ago. Now it reeked of perfume that wasn't hers and sweat that belonged to strangers. Sophia backed away from the door, her hospital slippers silent on the hardwood floor. Her post-surgery body ached, the small incision in her abdomen pulling as she moved, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the ice spreading through her veins. She should be crying. She should be screaming. She should be calling them both every name in the book and demanding explanations. Instead, she found herself in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker Robert had bought her for their 10th anniversary. Her hands shook as she filled it with water, muscle memory taking over while her mind struggled to process what she'd just witnessed. The familiar ritual of making coffee grounded her, gave her something to focus on besides the sounds still drifting from upstairs. As the coffee brewed, Sophia's reflection stared back at her from the kitchen window. She looked pale, tired from her hospital stay, her natural hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was still beautiful at 35, her skin smooth and glowing despite everything, but she felt ancient in this moment. Ancient and foolish. How long had this been going on? How many times had Robert lied to her face? How many business trips, late meetings, and weekend conferences had actually been spent in bed with this woman? The questions multiplied in her mind, each one adding another layer to the cold fury building inside her. She heard footsteps on the stairs, Robert's heavy tread. Sophia quickly moved to the living room and settled on the couch, grabbing a magazine from the coffee table. She needed to look natural, like she'd been home for a while. Like she hadn't seen anything at all. Sophia? Robert's voice carried surprise and panic. I thought you weren't coming home until tomorrow? She looked up from the magazine she hadn't been reading, her face a mask of calm. The doctor said I was healing faster than expected. They released me early. Her voice sounded normal, conversational even. Inside, she marveled at her own composure. Robert stood in the doorway wearing only his boxer shorts, his brown hair messy, sweat still glistening on his chest. He was a handsome man, tall, well-built, with kind eyes that had attracted her all those years ago. Those same eyes now held guilt and fear. That's great, honey. I was just taking a nap. Long day at the office. The lie came so easily to him that Sophia wondered how many others she'd swallowed over the years. Where's your car? She asked, noting that only hers was in the driveway. In the shop. Tom dropped me off. Another lie. Tom was Robert's business partner, and she could call him right now to verify, but she didn't need to. She knew the truth. Footsteps creaked overhead. The woman was still upstairs, probably getting dressed, probably planning her escape. Sophia wondered if Robert would make some excuse to go back upstairs, or if he'd find a way to get the woman out without Sophia noticing. She almost wanted to see how creative he could be with his deception. I'm tired, Sophia said finally, closing the magazine. I think I'll go rest in the guest room so I don't disturb you if you're still napping. Relief flooded Robert's features. That's probably a good idea. You need your rest after the surgery. Such concern. Such loving care. If she hadn't seen what she'd seen, she might have been touched by his thoughtfulness. Instead, she recognized it for what it was, a way to keep her away while he dealt with his problem upstairs. Sophia gathered her purse and hospital bag, moving slowly to maintain the pretense of post-surgical weakness. As she climbed the stairs to the guest room, she heard Robert's hushed voice on his phone, no doubt warning his lover to stay quiet until Sophia was settled. In the guest room, Sophia sat on the bed and stared at her hands. They were steady now, the initial shock wearing off and being replaced by something else entirely. She thought about the woman she'd seen, young, beautiful, everything Sophia had been 12 years ago when she'd married Robert. But Sophia wasn't that naive girl anymore. She was older, wiser, and much more dangerous than Robert realized. She heard a door close downstairs, then Robert's voice calling out that he was going to check the mail. The perfect cover for his lover's departure. Sophia moved to the window and watched a silver BMW pull out of their driveway, expensive car for someone who was supposedly just a fling. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Fell asleep on the couch. We'll sleep down here tonight so I don't wake you. Rest well, love you. Well, the word felt like poison in her mind. Robert Sterling had no idea what love meant, and after 12 years of marriage he was about to get an education he'd never forget. Sophia opened her laptop and began typing. She had research to do, plans to make, and a future to secure. The woman who had walked into that house today might have been a victim, but the woman who would emerge from this situation would be something else entirely. 3 days passed before Sophia made her first move. 3 days of playing the recovering patient while Robert hovered with fake concern, bringing her soup and adjusting her pillows. 3 days of pretending to believe his lies while she planned her next steps with surgical precision. The silver BMW was her starting point. During Robert's morning jog, a routine he'd only started 6 months ago, she now realized Sophia sat at her computer and began her investigation. The license plate had been partially visible from her window, and with some creative searching on social media and public records, she soon had a name. Candace Rivers, 28, real estate agent at Premier Properties downtown. Candace's Instagram was a goldmine of information. Photos from expensive restaurants Sophia recognized, vacation shots from places Robert claimed he'd visited for business conferences, workout videos from the gym where Robert had suddenly started exercising regularly. The timeline painted a clear picture of an affair that had been building for months. But it was Candace's Facebook that provided the real treasure. Check-ins at hotels, tagged locations at wine bars, even a photo from their anniversary dinner last month, the same restaurant where Robert had taken Sophia years ago, claiming it was their place. Seeing Candace's manicured fingers holding a champagne glass at what Sophia had believed was their special spot felt like a physical blow. Sophia screenshotted everything, organizing the evidence in a password-protected folder on her laptop. She cross-referenced dates with Robert's calendar, noting every time his claimed location didn't match Candace's posts. The pattern was damning and thorough. Her phone rang. Nina, her younger sister who lived across town. "How are you feeling, Soph? Do you need anything?" "I'm fine," Sophia said automatically, then paused. Nina was sharp, trustworthy, and worked as a paralegal at a law firm. If anyone could help her navigate this situation, it was her sister. "Actually, could you come over? Robert's at work and I could use some company." Nina arrived within an hour, armed with soup from Sophia's favorite deli and enough gossip to fill an afternoon. She was the opposite of Sophia in many ways, shorter, Kavya, with a wild sense of humor that had gotten them both in trouble as kids. But they shared the same keen intelligence and fierce loyalty to each other. "You look terrible," Nina said bluntly, settling into the kitchen chair across from Sophia. "And I don't mean post-surgery terrible. I mean something is seriously wrong terrible." Sophia had planned to ease into the conversation, but looking at her sister's concerned face, she found herself blurting out the truth. "Robert's having an affair." Nina's soup spoon clattered into her bowl. "What? Are you sure? How do you know?" "I saw them. In our bed. 3 days ago when I came home early from the hospital." The words felt strange in her mouth, clinical and detached. "Oh, sophomore." Nina reached across the table to grab her sister's hands. "I'm so sorry. What did you do? Please tell me you didn't just pretend nothing happened." "That's exactly what I did." Sophia pulled up the folder on her laptop, showing Nina the evidence she'd compiled. "I've been gathering information instead." Nina scrolled through the screenshots, her expression growing darker with each image. "This is, wow. She's not even trying to hide it. Look at this." She tagged herself at the hotel where Robert claimed he had that insurance conference last month. "I know. And look at this." Sophia showed her sister Robert's credit card statements, which she'd accessed through their joint account. "Jewelry purchases I never received, restaurant bills for dates I never went on, hotel rooms charged when he was supposedly at business meetings. He's been financing his affair with your money." Nina's voice was flat with anger. "Sophia, you can't just sit on this. You need to confront him." "No." Sophia's response was immediate and firm. "Confronting him now gives him the advantage. He'll lie, make promises he won't keep, maybe even gaslight me into thinking I'm overreacting. I need more than just evidence of an affair, Nina. I need to understand the full scope of what I'm dealing with." Nina studied her sister's face. "You're planning something." "I'm planning everything." Sophia minimized the laptop screen and turned to face Nina fully. 12 years of marriage don't just disappear because my husband couldn't keep his pants on. I've invested too much of myself in this relationship to walk away without making sure I get what I deserve. Which is what, exactly? Justice. And independence. Sophia's voice was steady, controlled. Robert made his choice when he brought that woman into our bed. Now he gets to live with the consequences of that choice. Nina was quiet for a long moment, processing her sister's calm determination. What do you need from me? Information. You work at a law firm who's the best divorce attorney in the city? Patricia Kim at Morrison & Associates. She's ruthless but fair and she doesn't lose cases. Nina paused. But Soph, are you sure you want to go straight to divorce? Maybe counseling could. No. Sophia's interruption was sharp. There's no coming back from this, Nina. The moment Robert decided to cheat, he ended our marriage. I'm just making it official. That afternoon, after Nina left with promises to set up a consultation with Patricia Kim, Sophia continued her investigation. She combed through Robert's computer history, finding deleted emails that revealed the depth of his deception. Messages to Candace talking about leaving Sophia, discussions about weekend getaways, even cruel jokes about his wife's naivety. One email thread made her blood run cold. Candace, when are you going to tell her? I'm tired of sneaking around. Robert, soon, baby. I just need to figure out the finances first. She's going to take me to the cleaners in a divorce. Candace, maybe we should be smarter about hiding the assets then. Robert, already on it. Tom's helping me set up some offshore accounts. Sophia won't know what hit her. Sophia read the exchange 3 times, her hands trembling with rage. They weren't just having an affair, they were actively planning to steal from her. Robert was trying to hide their marital assets to avoid a fair settlement, and his lover was helping him do it. She forwarded the emails to her private account, then deleted any trace of her snooping. This evidence would be crucial in court, but only if Robert didn't know she had it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. More lies. According to Candace's Instagram story from an hour ago, she was at a wine bar downtown probably waiting for Robert to join her after his fictitious work emergency. Sophia poured herself a glass of wine and settled into the living room with her laptop. If Robert wanted to play games with their marriage, she would show him what a real strategist looked like. By the time she was finished, he would regret the day he decided to betray her trust. The naive woman who had walked in on her husband 3 days ago was gone. In her place sat someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Robert Sterling was about to learn that betraying Sophia had been the biggest mistake of his life. Patricia Kim's office overlooked the city from the 23rd floor, all glass and steel that reflected Sophia's determination back at her. The lawyer was exactly what Nina had promised: sharp, professional, and completely unimpressed by sob stories. She listened to Sophia's account without interruption, taking notes on a legal pad with precise handwriting. You've been thorough, Patricia said when Sophia finished presenting her evidence. Most clients come to me with suspicions and hurt feelings. You've come with documentation. I believe in being prepared. Sophia sat straight in her chair, her hands folded in her lap. She dressed carefully for this meeting, professional but not flashy, the kind of outfit that said she was serious about business. Good. Because what your husband is doing, the asset hiding, the offshore accounts, that's fraud. We can use this in the divorce proceedings, but we need to be strategic about when and how we reveal what you know. Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying Sophia with calculating eyes. The question is, what do you want out of this? Some women in your situation want reconciliation. Others want revenge. A few want justice. Which are you? Justice, Sophia said without hesitation. And independence. I want Robert to face consequences for his choices, and I want to rebuild my life without him. Then we need to discuss strategy. Patricia pulled out a fresh legal pad. First, we don't let him know you're filing until we've secured evidence of all his assets. Second, we use his fraud attempts against him to maximize your settlement. Third, we make sure his affair partner can't benefit from anything they've stolen from your marriage. The consultation lasted 2 hours. By the end, Sophia had retained Patricia's services and received a detailed plan for protecting herself financially while gathering more evidence. She left the office feeling more empowered than she had in years. Her next stop was coffee with Zara, her best friend since college. They met at their usual spot, a small cafe near Zara's graphic design studio where they'd been meeting monthly for over a decade. Zara was already there, her artistic eye evident in the way she'd arranged her colorful scarf and vintage jewelry. You look different, Zara said as soon as Sophia sat down. Good different? Like you've made a decision about something. Sophia had planned to ease into the conversation, but Zara's directness demanded honesty. Robert's cheating on me. That bastard. Zara's response was immediate and fierce. I knew something was off. He's been acting weird at parties, always checking his phone, making excuses to leave early. When did you find out? A week ago. I came home early from the hospital and found them in our bed. Sophia stirred her coffee, the motion helping her maintain composure while she explained the situation. Zara listened with growing anger, her artistic hands gesturing expressively as she processed each detail. So what's the plan? Please tell me you're not going to forgive him and try to work it out. I'm divorcing him. But I'm doing it right with evidence, with legal protection, and with a strategy that ensures I get what I deserve from 12 years of marriage. Good. Zara leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. What do you need from me? Emotional support. And maybe some creative problem solving. You see patterns that other people miss. It's what makes you such a good designer. They spent the next hour going over everything Sophia had discovered. Zara had a talent for connecting seemingly unrelated details, and she quickly spotted something Sophia had missed. Look at these dates, Zara said, spreading printouts of Candace's social media posts across the table. She's posting from expensive places constantly, but according to her real estate license information, she only started at Premier Properties 8 months ago. Where's she getting the money for all this? Sophia studied the timeline. Zara was right. Candace's lifestyle seemed far beyond what a new real estate agent should be able to afford, even with Robert's contributions. Maybe she has family money? Sophia suggested. Or maybe she's not just seeing Robert. Zara pulled out her phone and started scrolling through Candace's Instagram with practiced efficiency. Look at this. She's tagged with different men in several photos, and she's careful about the angles so you can't always see their faces clearly. This woman is running a game. The possibility that Candace was manipulating multiple men simultaneously added a new dimension to the situation. If Robert wasn't her only source of income, it meant he wasn't as special to her as he probably believed. Can you dig deeper into this? Sophia asked. Your design background makes you good at visual analysis. I'm on it. Give me a few days to really comb through her online presence. If she's playing multiple men, there will be evidence in her digital footprint. They parted ways with Zara promising to compile a comprehensive profile of Candace's activities and potential other relationships. Sophia drove home feeling like she was building an army of allies, each contributing their unique skills to her cause. That evening, Robert came home with flowers, grocery store roses that looked guilty and desperate. He'd been bringing her small gifts all week, probably trying to assuage his conscience while continuing his affair. How was your day? He asked, kissing her cheek with lips that had probably touched another woman hours earlier. Quiet. I'm still recovering, so I mostly just rested. The lie came easily now. Sophia was discovering she had a talent for deception when it served her purposes. That's good. You need to take care of yourself. Robert seemed nervous, fidgeting with his wedding ring. I was thinking maybe we should plan a weekend getaway when you're feeling better. Just the two of us. Sophia almost laughed. The same man who was planning to leave her was now suggesting romantic trips. That sounds nice. Where did you have in mind? Maybe that bed and breakfast in the mountains you liked? We could reconnect, spend some quality time together. The irony was crushing. Robert wanted to reconnect with her while actively planning their divorce to benefit his mistress. But Sophia simply smiled and agreed it sounded lovely, all while mentally adding this conversation to her growing file of evidence about his deception. Later that night, as Robert slept beside her, he'd moved back into their bedroom after her first night in the guest room. Sophia stared at the ceiling and thought about the network she was building. Patricia for legal strategy, Nina for research and support, Zara for investigation and emotional backup. 3 strong, intelligent women who had her back completely. Robert had his mistress and his business partner helping him steal from their marriage. But Sophia had something better. She had people who cared about her well-being more than their own interests. In the war that was coming, loyalty would matter more than passion, and integrity would triumph over greed. The naive wife who had believed in their marriage was gone. In her place was a woman who understood that sometimes love meant knowing when to fight, and sometimes fighting meant being willing to destroy everything to save yourself. 2 weeks into her investigation, Sophia discovered that Robert's betrayal ran deeper than adultery. While pretending to recover from surgery and playing the devoted wife, she had been methodically examining their financial records. What she found made her stomach turn with a mixture of rage and fear. Robert hadn't just been spending their money on his affair, he'd been stealing from his clients to fund his double life. The revelation came through Tom Patterson, Robert's business partner, though he didn't know he was providing it. Sophia had called the office looking for Robert, who was supposedly in a meeting but was actually at lunch with Candace according to the woman's Instagram story. "He's been working such long hours lately," Tom said during their brief conversation. "I'm actually worried about him. Some of our client accounts have had irregularities. Nothing major but enough to make me nervous. I've been trying to get him to review the books with me, but he keeps putting me off." After hanging up, Sophia sat in her kitchen staring at her phone. Tom's casual mention of irregularities in client accounts sent ice through her veins. She immediately called Patricia Kim. "We need to meet," Sophia said as soon as the lawyer answered. "Today if possible. I think Robert's embezzling from his business." Patricia rearranged her schedule, and they met that afternoon in the lawyer's office. Sophia explained Tom's concerns and showed Patricia the evidence she'd been gathering about Robert's spending patterns. "Look at this," Sophia said, spreading out printouts of their bank statements. 6 months ago, Robert started making large cash deposits into our joint account amounts that don't correspond to his regular salary or commission checks. When I asked him about them, he said they were bonuses for landing big clients." Patricia studied the documents with a practiced eye. "How large are we talking?" "5 to 10,000 at a time, every few weeks. In 6 months he's deposited nearly $60,000 in unexplained cash. And this coincides with when his affair started?" "Almost exactly. The first large deposit was made 2 weeks after Candace started posting photos from expensive restaurants and hotels." Patricia leaned back in her chair, her expression grim. "If Robert is embezzling client funds, this changes everything. Divorce proceedings will be the least of his problems. He could be facing criminal charges. What do? We document everything, but we don't act yet. If we tip him off too early, he might destroy evidence or flee. I'm going to put you in touch with a forensic accountant who specializes in financial fraud. Meanwhile, you need to continue acting like the unsuspecting wife while we build an airtight case." The forensic accountant, James Chin, met with Sophia the next day at Patricia's office. He was a quiet man with sharp eyes who listened intently as Sophia explained the situation. "I'll need access to all your financial records, both personal and any business documents you can obtain legally," James said. "Do you have any way to access Robert's business computer or files?" "He works from home sometimes. His laptop is usually in his office upstairs." Sophia hesitated. "But I can't just start going through his private business files. That would be obvious." "Actually, as his wife, you have some legal rights to access documents related to your household finances," Patricia interjected. "If he's using marital assets to commit fraud, you're potentially liable as well. You have a right to protect yourself." That night, while Robert was out for his evening jog, which Sophia now knew was cover for another meeting with Candace, she carefully accessed his home office computer. Her hands shook as she navigated through his files, knowing that what she found could destroy not just their marriage but Robert's entire life. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. Spreadsheets showing client account balances that didn't match bank records. Email exchanges with offshore banking services. Transfer records that showed money being moved from client accounts into holding accounts before being funneled to Robert's personal use. But the most shocking discovery was a file labeled Exit Strategy, a detailed plan for Robert to disappear with over $200,000 in stolen client funds. The plan included new identities for both him and Candace, foreign bank accounts, and a timeline for liquidating assets without detection. Sophia photographed everything with her phone, her hands steady now despite the magnitude of what she was discovering. Robert wasn't just cheating on her and stealing from their marriage, he was planning to ruin multiple families by stealing their life savings and retirement funds. The file revealed the names of affected clients: elderly couples who had trusted Robert with their retirement planning, young families saving for their children's education, widows who relied on their husbands' insurance settlements. Robert was stealing from vulnerable people who had put their faith in him. Among the affected clients was Mrs. Henderson, their neighbor 3 houses down. The 78-year-old widow had often mentioned how grateful she was for Robert's financial advice after her husband died. According to Robert's files, he had stolen nearly $40,000 from her retirement account, money she couldn't afford to lose. Sophia printed copies of the most damaging documents, hiding them in a safe deposit box she opened the next morning. She also forwarded encrypted copies to Patricia and James, ensuring that even if Robert discovered her investigation, the evidence would be preserved. The weight of what she'd discovered settled on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. This wasn't just about her marriage anymore. Robert's crimes would devastate innocent people who had trusted him with their financial security. That evening, Robert returned from his supposed business dinner, another lie, as Candace's social media showed them at a wine bar across town, and found Sophia in the kitchen preparing his favorite meal. "You're looking better," he said, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "I've missed this, you taking care of us." The irony was suffocating. Robert missed being taken care of while he systematically destroyed their life and the lives of his clients. But Sophia leaned into his embrace and smiled. "I've missed it too. I want to be a good wife to you, Robert. You work so hard to take care of us." His arms tightened around her and she felt him relax against her back. If only he knew that his good wife was building a case that would ensure he spent the next decade in prison. "I love you, Sophia. I hope you know that." She turned in his arms and looked into his eyes, the same eyes that had lied to her for months, that looked at her with false tenderness while planning her destruction. "I love you too," she replied, meaning every word in a way he couldn't possibly understand. She loved him enough to make sure he faced the consequences of his actions. She loved their marriage enough to ensure it ended with justice rather than betrayal. And she loved herself enough to fight for the life she deserved. Robert had made his choices. Now Sophia would make hers. Sophia's performance as the perfect wife became flawless over the next 3 weeks. She cooked Robert's favorite meals, pressed his shirts, and greeted him with smiles that never reached her eyes. She asked about his day with genuine seeming interest, listened to his lies about business meetings and late conferences, and responded with the kind of supportive comments she'd perfected over 12 years of marriage. Robert began to relax in her presence, his guilt apparently soothed by her renewed attention. He started staying home more evenings, claiming he wanted to spend time with her during her recovery. This created a problem. If he was home, he wasn't with Candace, and if he wasn't with Candace, Sophia couldn't monitor their activities or gather additional evidence. So she began encouraging his absences with strategic suggestions. "You've been working so hard lately," she said one Thursday evening as he settled on the couch beside her. "Why don't you go out with Tom tomorrow night? You deserve some time to relax with friends." Robert's face showed surprise and pleasure. "Really? You wouldn't mind?" "Of course not. I'll probably just go to bed early anyway. I'm still getting tired easily." She leaned against his shoulder, playing the part of the recovering patient who just wanted her husband to be happy. "Maybe I will. Tom's been wanting to try that new sports bar downtown." Sophia nodded supportively, already knowing that Robert would use his night out with Tom as cover for another evening with Candace. Sure enough, when Friday night arrived, Candace's Instagram story showed her at an upscale restaurant across town, dressed for a romantic dinner. This pattern allowed Sophia to continue her investigation while maintaining her facade. On the nights Robert was supposed to be with Tom, who actually spent his Friday evenings at home with his wife and twin daughters, Sophia met with Patricia and James, reviewing evidence and planning their next moves. "His confidence is working in our favor," Patricia noted during one of their evening meetings. "Robert thinks he's gotten away with everything. He's not being careful anymore." James had traced the money trail through multiple accounts and discovered that Robert's embezzlement totaled nearly $400,000, far more than Sophia had initially suspected. "He's been at this for over a year," James explained. The affair with Candace coincided with an escalation in his stealing, but he was skimming from client accounts long before he met her. The revelation that Robert had been a criminal long before his adultery somehow made Sophia feel both better and worse. Better because it meant his betrayal hadn't been about her inadequacies as a wife. He'd been fundamentally dishonest from the beginning. Worse because it meant she'd been married to a man she'd never really known. Zara had completed her investigation of Candace's social media and dating patterns, presenting Sophia with a comprehensive report that would have impressed any private detective. "Your husband's girlfriend is running a sophisticated operation," Zara said, spreading photos and printouts across Sophia's dining room table. "I've identified at least 4 different men she's been seeing simultaneously over the past 8 months. Each one thinks he's her only serious relationship." The photos showed Candace with various men at expensive restaurants, hotels, and vacation destinations. She was careful to crop faces in most photos, but Zara's artistic eye had caught details that revealed the different relationships: different hands holding wine glasses, different watches visible in romantic dinner photos, different cars in the background of her selfies. "She's not just cheating on Robert," Sophia said, studying the evidence. "She's systematically defrauding multiple men." "Exactly. And look at this." Zara pulled out a timeline she'd created showing Candace's expenses versus her likely income. Even with what Robert's been giving her, plus whatever she's getting from these other men, the math doesn't add up. She's spending more than she should be able to afford. Which means what? Either she has another source of income we haven't identified, or she's running up debt that she expects someone else to pay. Given what you've told me about Robert's exit strategy plans, I'm betting she thinks he's going to solve all her financial problems when they run away together. This information gave Sophia a new weapon. If Candace was deceiving Robert just as thoroughly as Robert was deceiving her, it meant their partnership was built on mutual lies and greed rather than genuine affection. That weakness could be exploited when the time was right. Meanwhile, Sophia continued perfecting her performance at home. She surprised Robert with tickets to a basketball game he'd mentioned wanting to see, gave him space to take his business calls in private, and even suggested he needed new clothes for his important client meetings. "You're amazing," Robert said one evening after she'd surprised him with dinner from his favorite restaurant. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." The comment was so absurd that Sophia almost laughed. Instead, she smiled and kissed his cheek. "You work so hard for our future. It's the least I can do." If Robert had been paying attention, he might have noticed the subtle changes in his wife's behavior. She was more observant now, asking casual questions about his work and his schedule that she'd never shown interest in before. She was taking better care of herself too, eating healthier, exercising regularly, buying new clothes that made her feel confident and attractive. But Robert was too consumed with his double life to notice his wife's transformation. He saw what he expected to see: a devoted spouse who was grateful for his attention and support during her recovery. The breakthrough came during the 4th week of Sophia's perfect wife act. Robert left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered, and it buzzed with a text from Candace. Sophia glanced at the screen and saw just enough to make her blood boil. "Can't wait for tonight. Wear the cologne I bought you. Love you." Robert was wearing cologne that another woman had purchased for him, accepting gifts from his mistress while his wife cooked his meals and washed his clothes. The casual intimacy of the message, the assumption that Robert would read it and respond with equal affection, made Sophia's perfect wife mask slip for just a moment. But only for a moment. By the time Robert emerged from the shower, Sophia was back in character, humming while she folded his laundry and pretending she hadn't seen the message that proved how thoroughly he'd replaced her in his heart. That night, after Robert left for his business dinner, cologne and all, Sophia called Nina. "I can't do this much longer," she admitted. "Pretending everything is normal while watching him lie to my face every day is destroying me." "Then don't," Nina said simply. "Patricia says you have enough evidence to file for divorce and press criminal charges. You've done more than enough preparation. But James thinks Robert might try to flee the country if he realizes we're onto him. We need to time this perfectly to make sure he can't escape justice. So let's set a trap," Nina suggested. "Force him to make a mistake that exposes everything at once." The idea sparked something in Sophia's mind. She'd been reactive for weeks, gathering evidence and building cases while Robert continued his deception. But what if she became proactive? What if she created a situation where Robert's lies would collapse under their own weight? "I need to talk to Patricia," Sophia said. "I think I know how to end this." The perfect wife act had served its purpose. Sophia had learned everything she needed to know about her husband's crimes and his character. Now it was time to stop being the victim and start being the architect of justice. Robert thought he was playing a game where he held all the cards. He was about to discover that his wife had been playing a different game entirely, one where the rules were about to change in ways he never saw coming. Sophia's plan crystallized during a sleepless night in early November. She lay in bed beside Robert, listening to him breathe peacefully while her mind worked through every detail of what she was about to do. By dawn, she had mapped out a strategy that would force Robert to reveal the full extent of his deception while ensuring he couldn't escape the consequences. The plan required perfect timing and flawless acting. Most importantly, it required her to appear more vulnerable and trusting than ever before, the complete opposite of how she actually felt. Phase 1 began that morning over breakfast. Sophia sat across from Robert at their kitchen table, wearing the soft pink robe he'd always said made her look beautiful, her natural hair styled in the loose curls he preferred. "Robert," she began, her voice trembling just slightly, "I need to talk to you about something." He looked up from his phone, probably checking messages from Candace, with the expression of mild concern he'd perfected over the past month. "Of course, honey. What's wrong?" Sophia took a shaky breath, channeling every ounce of vulnerability she could muster. "Yesterday when you were in the shower, your phone buzzed and I saw a text message. From someone named Candace." Robert's entire body went rigid. His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips, and Sophia watched the color drain from his face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Sophia, I can explain. Please don't lie to me anymore, she interrupted, letting tears gather in her eyes. I've suspected something was wrong for weeks. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way you've been distant even when you're trying to be affectionate. I know you're having an affair. Robert set down his coffee cup with shaking hands. Sophia. I love you, she continued, the words tasting like poison but sounding heartbroken. I love you so much that I've been trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But I can't pretend anymore. Is she in love with you too? The question was calculated. Sophia knew from Robert's stolen emails that Candace had been pressuring him to leave his wife, claiming she was tired of being the other woman. She also knew from Zara's investigation that Candace was simultaneously seeing other men. But Robert didn't know that Sophia knew any of this. Yes, Robert said quietly, looking down at his hands. She is. And you love her? Yes, I do. I'm sorry, Sophia. I never meant for this to happen. Sophia let the tears fall freely now, though they came from rage rather than heartbreak. How long? 8 months. Where did you meet her? At a real estate conference. She's an agent and we just connected. More lies. Sophia knew from her investigation that Robert and Candace had met at a bar, not a professional conference. But she played along, nodding as if this made the betrayal more understandable. Are you going to leave me for her? Robert's silence was answer enough. Sophia watched him struggle with how much truth to reveal, unaware that she already knew about his exit strategy plans. I don't know, he finally said. I'm confused about everything. I care about you, Sophia, but what I have with Candace is different. Yes. Sophia wiped her tears and straightened her shoulders, as if gathering courage for what came next. I want to meet her. What? Robert's head snapped up, his eyes wide with panic. If you're going to leave me for her, I want to understand what makes her so special. I want to meet the woman who's going to take my place. Sophia, that's not a good idea. Why not? She leaned forward, her voice gaining strength. If this is really about love and not just about sex, then she must be an incredible person. Someone worth destroying a 12-year marriage for. I want to see what that looks like. Robert stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. You want to meet Candace? Yes. Arrange it. Tonight if possible. Sophia, this is crazy. People don't just. People whose marriages are ending do, she interrupted. Robert, if you're going to leave me, I need closure. I need to understand what I'm losing to and why I wasn't enough. Can you at least give me that? The request was so unexpected and seemingly innocent that Robert found himself nodding before he could think through the implications. I'll call her, he said. But Sophia, I don't think this will go the way you're hoping. Maybe not. But I need to try. That evening, they met at a neutral restaurant downtown, the same place where Robert had taken Sophia for their first anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on her, though she kept her expression carefully composed as she spotted Candace at a corner table. Candace Rivers was everything Sophia had expected, young, beautiful, and radiating the kind of confidence that came from knowing she was desired. She wore a black dress that hugged her curves and jewelry that Sophia recognized from Robert's recent business expense purchases. Candace, this is my wife, Sophia, Robert said awkwardly as they approached the table. Sophia, this is Candace. Candace extended a manicured hand with surprising grace. It's nice to meet you, Sophia. Robert's told me so much about you. Sophia shook the offered hand, noting the expensive rings on Candace's fingers. I wish I could say the same. They sat down in the most awkward triangle in restaurant history. Robert looked like he wanted to disappear, while Candace seemed curious about what Sophia might say or do. So, Sophia began, her voice steady, Robert tells me you two are in love. Candace glanced at Robert, then back at Sophia. Yes, we are. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Are you? Sorry, I mean. The question caught Candace off guard. Yes, of course. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did anyway. For 8 months, you've been sleeping with my husband, accepting gifts bought with my money, and making plans for a future that requires my destruction. So forgive me if your sympathy feels a little hollow. Candace's composed facade cracked slightly. Sophia, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You saw a married man with money and decided you wanted what he could give you. The question is, do you actually love him or do you just love what he represents? Of course I love him, Candace snapped, her true nature beginning to show. Robert and I have something real. Something you obviously couldn't give him or he wouldn't have come looking elsewhere. Interesting theory. Tell me, Does Robert know about Michael? The color drained from Candace's face. What? Michael from the BMW dealership. Tall, athletic, takes you to expensive steakhouses on Tuesday nights. Or what about James from the investment firm? You seem to really enjoy those weekend trips to wine country with him. Robert turned to stare at Candace, confusion and dawning realization crossing his features. What is she talking about? Candace's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I don't know what you mean. Really? Because I have photos, Candace. Lots of them. You're very active on social media for someone who's supposedly in an exclusive relationship. The trap was closing perfectly. Sophia watched as Robert's face cycled through confusion, hurt, and anger as he processed what she was revealing. Candace. Robert's voice was tight with controlled fury. Is what she's saying true? Robert, I can explain. Are you seeing other men? The silence stretched for 10 painful seconds before Candace finally nodded, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. How many? Robert's voice was deadly quiet. It's not what you think. How many? 3 others. But Robert, what we have is different. Robert stood up so abruptly that his chair nearly toppled over. You've been lying to me. All this time, while I was planning to leave my wife for you, you were cheating on me with 3 other men. Robert, please sit down, Sophia said calmly. We're not finished talking. Both Robert and Candace stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. Actually, Candace, there's something else Robert should know. Tell him about the credit cards. Candace's face went white. Sophia, please. What credit cards? Robert demanded. Sophia smiled sweetly at both of them. The ones she's been opening in the names of the men she's dating. Including you, Robert. Did you know you now have a Visa card with a $15,000 balance? Candace has been very busy shopping. The next few minutes dissolved into accusations, denials, and revelations as Sophia calmly destroyed both of their carefully constructed lies. She watched with satisfaction as Robert realized that Candace had been using him just as ruthlessly as he'd been using his wife, and as Candace realized that her game had been exposed by the woman she'd underestimated. When the shouting died down, Sophia stood up and gathered her purse. Well, this has been enlightening. Robert, I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow morning. Don't bother coming home tonight, I've changed the locks. Candace, you might want to call those other boyfriends and warn them about the credit card fraud. I've already reported it to the authorities. She walked away from the table, leaving behind 2 people who were finally seeing each other clearly for the first time in 8 months. The trap had worked perfectly, but this was only the beginning. Phase 2 of Sophia's plan would ensure that Robert's crimes caught up with him in ways he never saw coming. The morning after the restaurant confrontation, Sophia woke up in her sister Nina's guest room feeling lighter than she had in months. The performance was over. The mask had been removed. Robert now knew that she knew about his affair, though he still had no idea how much more she'd discovered about his criminal activities. Her phone had been buzzing all night with calls and texts from Robert, but she'd turned it off after the first few desperate messages. Let him panic. Let him wonder what she was planning next. The uncertainty would make him sloppy. Nina knocked on the bedroom door, entering with coffee and a knowing smile. How does it feel to stop pretending? Like I can finally breathe again. Sophia accepted the coffee gratefully. Though now comes the hard part. Which is making sure Robert faces consequences for everything he's done, not just the affair. They were interrupted by Sophia's phone ringing. Patricia Kim calling at 7:30 in the morning. I assume last night went according to plan? The lawyer asked without preamble. Better than I hoped. Robert and Candace imploded spectacularly when they realized they'd been playing each other. Good. That sets us up perfectly for phase 2. Can you be in my office by 9? We need to coordinate with several other parties. Sophia arrived at Patricia's office to find she wasn't the only one who had been working behind the scenes. James Chin, the forensic accountant, was there with files of financial evidence. But there were also 2 people she didn't recognize: Detective Lisa Park from the Financial Crimes Unit and Rebecca Martinez, an attorney from the district attorney's office. Sophia, your evidence has given us everything we need to pursue criminal charges against your husband, Detective Park said. But we need to move quickly. If he suspects we're on to him, he might try to flee or destroy evidence. How quickly? Sophia asked. Today. We're executing search warrants on his office and your home this afternoon. We'll also be freezing all accounts connected to his business to prevent further theft. Rebecca Martinez leaned forward. We also want to discuss plea negotiations. If your husband cooperates and helps us recover the stolen funds, we might be able to work out a deal that ensures his victims get their money back. And if he doesn't cooperate? Then he's looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud, embezzlement and money laundering. Sophia felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. She'd wanted justice, but the reality of sending her husband to prison for over a decade was more sobering than she'd expected. "What about Candace?" she asked. Detective Park consulted her notes. "The credit card fraud you reported gives us enough to arrest her, but we're still investigating the extent of her involvement in your husband's embezzlement scheme." "She helped him plan it," Sophia said, remembering the emails she'd found. "She knew about the offshore accounts and encouraged him to hide assets from me. Then she'll be facing conspiracy charges as well." The meeting lasted 3 hours as they coordinated the timing of arrests, search warrants and asset freezing. Sophia provided additional evidence and answered detailed questions about Robert's behavior and activities. By the time she left Patricia's office, she felt like she was part of a military operation rather than a divorce proceeding. Her next stop was lunch with Zara, who had been conducting her own investigation into Candace's other victims. "I found them," Zara announced as soon as Sophia sat down. "The other men Candace has been scamming. And you're not going to believe what I discovered." Zara pulled out a folder containing photos and documentation of Candace's various relationships. Michael Patterson, he's a BMW salesman, divorced, thought Candace was his exclusive girlfriend. She convinced him to co-sign a lease on an expensive apartment that she's never paid rent on. How much does he owe? $18,000 so far. But that's not the worst part. James Mitchell, the investment advisor Candace convinced him to invest her inheritance in high-risk stocks. She gave him $50,000 that we now know was stolen from various sources, including possibly Robert's embezzled funds. Sophia studied the photos of the men Candace had been manipulating. They looked successful, confident, and completely unaware they were being systematically robbed. "There's more," Zara continued. "I managed to contact Michael's ex-wife through social media. She told me that during their divorce, money went missing from their joint accounts, money that Michael claimed he'd spent on investments. I think Candace has been targeting divorced men specifically because they're vulnerable and their finances are already complicated. So she's been running this scam for longer than just the 8 months she's been with Robert. Much longer. I found evidence of at least 2 other men from earlier this year who suddenly disappeared from her social media after expensive trips and jewelry purchases. The scope of Candace's crimes was staggering. She wasn't just Robert's accomplice, she was a professional con artist who had been systematically destroying men's lives for personal gain. I've documented everything and shared it with that detective you mentioned, Zara said. These other victims deserve to know what happened to them. That afternoon, Sophia sat in Patricia's office and watched through the window as police cars arrived at the building that housed Robert's financial planning firm. She couldn't see the actual arrest from the 23rd floor, but she knew it was happening. The man she'd married 12 years ago was being led away in handcuffs while his victims were finally going to get justice. Her phone rang, Nina calling from the house. They're here, Nina said. Police cars, unmarked vans, people in suits carrying boxes out of Robert's office. Mrs. Henderson from down the street is standing in her yard crying. Mrs. Henderson. The elderly widow who had trusted Robert with her retirement funds and lost $40,000 to his greed. Seeing her pain would have broken Sophia's heart a month ago, but now it only strengthened her resolve. Is she okay? One of the investigators is talking to her. I think they're explaining that they might be able to recover her money. That evening, Sophia returned to her house for the first time since the restaurant confrontation. The police had finished their search, but evidence of their presence remained: rooms that had been carefully examined, file cabinets that stood open, spaces that felt violated by official scrutiny. She walked through the rooms she'd shared with Robert, seeing them with new eyes. The kitchen where she'd cooked his favorite meals while he planned to steal from her. The living room where they'd watched television together while he texted his mistress. The bedroom where they'd made love while he dreamed of another woman. But instead of sadness, Sophia felt a growing sense of freedom. This house had been the stage for Robert's deception, but it had also been where she discovered her own strength. She turned from victim to victor within these walls, and that transformation was worth more than any marriage built on lies. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Tom Patterson. I just heard about Robert's arrest. I'm so sorry, Sophia. I had no idea how extensive his crimes were. Thank you for having the courage to expose him. More messages followed from neighbors, former friends, even some of Robert's clients who had heard about the arrests. The common theme was gratitude mixed with shock. Robert had been well liked in their community, respected as a successful businessman and devoted husband. Learning about his double life had shattered many people's faith in their own judgment. But Sophia had learned something valuable through this experience. Sometimes the people who seem the most trustworthy are the most dangerous, and sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's destructive behavior. Robert had gambled everything on his ability to deceive and manipulate the people who cared about him. He'd lost that gamble completely, and now everyone he'd hurt was finally going to get the justice they deserved. The woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and absolutely committed to building a life based on truth rather than comfortable lies. 3 weeks after Robert's arrest, Sophia sat in the prosecutor's office listening to Rebecca Martinez explain the complexity of the case they were building. The Financial Crimes Unit had uncovered a web of fraud that went far beyond what anyone had initially suspected. "Your husband didn't just steal from his clients," Rebecca said, spreading documents across the conference table. "He was running what amounts to a Ponzi scheme. He was using new client investments to pay returns to existing clients while skimming money for personal use." Detective Park added her findings to the growing pile of evidence. "We've identified 37 victims so far, with total losses exceeding $800,000. Some of these people lost their entire life savings." Sophia stared at the numbers, feeling sick. She'd known Robert was a thief, but the scope of his crimes was staggering. How long was this going on? At least 2 years, possibly longer. He was very sophisticated about covering his tracks. James Chin, the forensic accountant, pulled out a chart showing the flow of money through various accounts. He created shell companies, used offshore banks, and manipulated his books to hide the theft from his business partner. "Speaking of Tom Patterson," Detective Park said, "he's been completely cooperative with our investigation. He had suspected something was wrong but didn't realize the extent of the fraud. He's actually helping us contact victims and freeze accounts to prevent further losses." The mention of Tom brought a wave of relief. Sophia had been worried that Robert's business partner might be complicit in the crimes, but it appeared Tom was as much a victim as anyone else. "What about Candace?" Sophia asked. Rebecca's expression hardened. "Candace Rivers is proving to be more problematic than your husband. She's hired an expensive attorney and is claiming she was manipulated by Robert, that she had no idea he was stealing money. That's not true. I have emails where she specifically encouraged him to hide assets from me." "We know. But her lawyer is arguing that she was emotionally manipulated by an older, more experienced criminal. They're trying to paint her as another victim." Detective Park pulled out a thick file. "However, our investigation into her other relationships has revealed a pattern of fraud going back 3 years. She's been systematically targeting divorced men and manipulating them into financial commitments they can't afford." "How many victims?" 8 that we can prove, possibly more. She would identify recently divorced men through social media and dating apps, establish relationships with them, and then slowly extract money through various schemes: fake emergencies, investment opportunities, co-signed loans. Sophia thought about the men whose lives Candace had destroyed and felt a familiar anger burning in her chest. What happens to her victims? "We're working with victim services to help them recover what we can, but many of them are probably going to lose everything. Divorced men often have limited assets to begin with, and Candace specifically targeted their vulnerabilities. The scope of destruction caused by Robert and Candace's greed was overwhelming. Dozens of families had been devastated by their crimes, elderly people faced poverty in their final years, and working families had lost their children's college funds. But there was some good news in the investigation. Detective Park explained that federal authorities had been able to freeze several offshore accounts before Robert and Candace could access them, recovering nearly $200,000 that could be returned to victims. "Your evidence was crucial to this recovery," Rebecca told Sophia. "If you hadn't documented Robert's plans to flee the country, we might never have found those accounts." After the meeting, Sophia drove to Mrs. Henderson's house. The elderly widow had been one of the first victims contacted by police, and Sophia wanted to check on her personally. Mrs. Henderson answered the door looking frail and exhausted. At 78, she didn't have the energy to rebuild her life after Robert's theft. "Sophia, dear, I'm so sorry about what Robert did to you," Mrs. Henderson said, inviting her into the small, neat living room. "I'm sorry about what he did to you, Mrs. Henderson. I had no idea he was stealing from his clients." "Of course you didn't. Robert fooled everyone." The older woman's voice was sad but not bitter. "I trusted him because he was your husband. I thought that meant he was honest." They sat together drinking tea while Mrs. Henderson explained how the theft had affected her life. The $40,000 Robert had stolen represented most of her liquid savings money she needed for medical expenses and home maintenance. The police say they might be able to recover some of it, but even if they do, the stress has been terrible. I haven't been sleeping well since I found out. Sophia felt responsible for Robert's crimes in a way that was both irrational and overwhelming. She knew she hadn't committed any crimes herself, but Mrs. Henderson and the other victims had trusted Robert partly because of his marriage to her. Mrs. Henderson, I want you to know that I'm going to do everything I can to help the victims get their money back. I'm donating my share of our marital assets to a fund for Robert's victims. The older woman's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Sophia, you don't need to do that. This isn't your fault. Maybe not, but it's the right thing to do. Robert stole money from people who trusted him, and I benefited from that theft even if I didn't know it. I want to make it right. Patricia had initially advised against giving up her claim to marital assets, but Sophia was determined. She didn't want money that had been stolen from innocent people, and she certainly didn't want to profit from Robert's crimes. That evening, Sophia met with Zara and Nina at their favorite restaurant to discuss the latest developments in the case. Are you sure about giving up the money? Nina asked. You deserve something after 12 years of marriage. I deserve justice, not stolen money, Sophia replied. Besides, I'm building my own career now. I don't need Robert's blood money to survive. Over the past month, Sophia had been working with a business consultant to establish her own marketing consultancy. Several of her former colleagues had already expressed interest in hiring her services, and she was confident she could build a successful independent practice. What about the house? Zara asked. I'm selling it. I can't live there anymore, knowing what Robert was doing while I was cooking his dinner and washing his clothes. Sophia had already contacted a real estate agent and received an encouraging assessment of the property's value. Where will you live? I'm looking at condos downtown. Something modern and clean with no memories attached. The idea of starting over in a space that was entirely hers felt liberating rather than frightening. As they talked, Sophia realized how much her perspective had changed over the past 2 months. The woman who had discovered her husband's affair had been devastated by the loss of her marriage. The woman sitting in this restaurant was excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. I have news about the trial dates, Nina said. Patricia called this afternoon. Robert's trial is scheduled for March and Candace's is set for May. Are you prepared to testify? Zara asked. Absolutely. I want to look both of them in the eye when I tell the truth about what they did. Sophia's voice was steady and determined. They destroyed a lot of lives with their greed and lies. It's time for them to face the consequences. The web that Robert and Candace had woven through their crimes was finally tightening around them. Soon they would discover that justice, unlike their victims' trust, couldn't be stolen or manipulated. And Sophia would be there to watch them learn that lesson, knowing that she had played a crucial role in ensuring that truth finally prevailed over deception. The courtroom was packed on the morning of Robert's sentencing hearing. Sophia sat in the front row, wearing a navy blue dress that gave her confidence and a calm expression that masked the turmoil she felt inside. This was the moment she had been working toward for 6 months, the day when Robert would finally face complete consequences for his actions. 37 victims had been invited to give impact statements. Mrs. Henderson spoke first, her voice trembling as she described how Robert's theft had forced her to sell her late husband's vintage car collection to pay for medical expenses. A young couple testified about losing their daughter's college fund. A widower explained how Robert had convinced him to invest his wife's life insurance settlement, money that was now gone forever. Each story was a reminder of the real cost of Robert's greed. These weren't numbers on a spreadsheet, they were real people whose lives had been shattered by someone they had trusted completely. When it was Sophia's turn to speak, she walked to the podium with steady steps. She had practiced this moment countless times, but standing before the judge with Robert watching from the defendant's table, she felt the weight of everything that had led to this point. Your Honor, she began, her voice clear and strong, I was married to Robert Sterling for 12 years. During that time, I believed I knew him completely. I thought he was honest, hardworking, and devoted to our marriage. I was wrong about everything except his capacity for deception. She turned to look directly at Robert, who was staring at his hands and refusing to meet her eyes. Robert didn't just steal money from his clients, he stole their trust, their security, and their faith in other people. He stole their retirement dreams and their children's futures. And he did it all while pretending to be someone who cared about their well-being. Her voice remained steady as she continued. But Robert also stole something from me. He stole 12 years of genuine love and replaced it with elaborate lies. He stole my ability to trust my own judgment. He stole my sense of safety in my own home and my own marriage. Finally, Robert looked up at her, his eyes filled with something that might have been remorse or might have been self-pity. However, Sophia continued, Robert's crimes also gave me something unexpected. They gave me the strength to discover who I really am when everything I believed about my life was stripped away. They gave me the courage to start over completely. And they gave me the satisfaction of knowing that I played a role in ensuring justice for his victims. She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering her final statement. I hope Robert serves every day of whatever sentence you impose, Your Honor. Not because I want revenge, but because justice demands consequences for the choices he made. The people he hurt deserve nothing less. When Sophia returned to her seat, she felt a sense of closure that had been building for months. She had said everything she needed to say, and now Robert's fate was in the hands of the justice system. Judge Williams listened to all the victim impact statements before addressing Robert directly. Mr. Sterling, you have pleaded guilty to 17 counts of wire fraud, 8 counts of embezzlement, and 4 counts of money laundering. Before I impose sentence, do you have anything to say to this court? Robert stood slowly, his expensive suit wrinkled and his face gaunt. Prison hadn't been kind to him during the 6 months he'd spent awaiting trial. Your Honor, I want to apologize to everyone I hurt, he began, his voice barely audible. I know my actions were inexcusable. I betrayed the trust of people who depended on me, and I destroyed my marriage to the woman I should have cherished above all else. He glanced toward Sophia, who watched him with an expression of polite interest but no emotional investment. I was selfish and greedy, and I convinced myself that I could fix everything before anyone got hurt. I was wrong about that, just like I was wrong about everything else. I'm sorry. Judge Williams was unmoved by Robert's apology. Mr. Sterling, your crimes were not the result of a momentary lapse in judgment. They were the product of a deliberate, systematic pattern of deception that continued for over 2 years. You stole from elderly clients who trusted you with their life savings. You manipulated your wife while planning to abandon her. You showed no remorse until you were caught. The judge paused, consulting his notes before continuing. The federal sentencing guidelines recommend 8 to 12 years imprisonment for crimes of this scope and severity. However, given the number of victims, the amount of money stolen, and your leadership role in this criminal enterprise, I am sentencing you to 15 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Robert's knees buckled slightly, and his attorney steadied him with a hand on his shoulder. Additionally, Judge Williams continued, you are ordered to pay full restitution to your victims in the amount of $843,000, plus interest and penalties. All of your assets, including the marital home, will be liquidated to satisfy this judgment. Sophia felt a complex mix of emotions as she watched Robert being led away in handcuffs. There was satisfaction in seeing justice served, sadness for the waste of a life that could have been different, and relief that this chapter of her story was finally closing. Outside the courthouse, she was approached by several of Robert's victims who wanted to thank her for her role in exposing his crimes. Mrs. Henderson hugged her tightly, tears streaming down both their faces. Because of your courage, we're going to get some of our money back, the elderly woman said. You could have stayed quiet and protected yourself, but you chose to do what was right. Tom Patterson, Robert's former business partner, also approached her. He looked exhausted but relieved that the legal proceedings were finally over. Sophia, I want you to know how sorry I am that I didn't catch this sooner, he said. I trusted Robert completely, and that trust allowed him to hurt so many people. You couldn't have known, Tom. Robert was very good at deception. Still, I feel responsible. I'm working with the Victim Compensation Fund to make sure everyone gets back as much as possible. 2 months later, it was Candace's turn to face justice. Her trial had been more complicated than Robert's because she had maintained her innocence throughout the proceedings, claiming she had been manipulated and used by Robert. The evidence told a different story. Prosecutors presented a timeline showing Candace's criminal activities going back 3 years, including detailed documentation of the men she had defrauded before meeting Robert. Zara's investigation had been crucial in building this case, providing social media evidence and victim testimony that painted a clear picture of Candace's systematic exploitation of vulnerable men. When Sophia testified at Candace's trial, she felt none of the emotional weight she had experienced during Robert's sentencing. Candace was not someone she had loved and trusted, she was simply a criminal who had participated in destroying innocent people's lives. Miss Rivers knew exactly what she was doing, Sophia told the jury. She helped my husband plan his crimes, encouraged him to hide assets from me, and all while she was running similar schemes on other men. She's not a victim, she's a predator who targets people when they're most vulnerable. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Candace was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to her victims, though most of the money she had stolen was already gone. As Sophia left the courthouse after Candace's sentencing, she realized that the woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal 9 months ago no longer existed. In her place was someone stronger, more independent, and absolutely committed to building a life based on truth and integrity. The revelation phase of her journey was complete. Robert and Candace had been exposed, tried, and sentenced. Justice had been served for their victims. Now it was time for the final chapter, building the life she deserved from the ashes of the life she had lost. 1 year after discovering Robert's betrayal, Sophia stood in her new downtown condominium watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and pink. The space was everything her old house hadn't been: modern, clean, and entirely hers. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, every decision had been made by her alone, for her own happiness and comfort. Her business was thriving beyond her wildest expectations. Sterling Marketing Solutions had grown from a desperate attempt at independence into a respected consultancy with 12 employees and clients across 3 states. The irony of keeping Robert's last name for her business wasn't lost on her. It served as a daily reminder of how far she had come and how much she had accomplished on her own. This morning was special. Today marked the official end of her divorce proceedings and the completion of victim restitution payments. The house she had shared with Robert had sold for enough money to cover most of what he owed his clients, and the offshore accounts that had been recovered provided additional compensation. Mrs. Henderson and the other victims wouldn't get back everything they had lost, but they would receive enough to rebuild their lives. Sophia's phone rang, Nina calling to check in, as she had every morning since this ordeal began. "How does it feel to be officially free?" her sister asked. "Like I can finally breathe again," Sophia replied, settling into her favorite chair with her morning coffee. "But also like I'm just getting started." "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking about the Victim Compensation Fund. What if we expanded it to help other people who've been betrayed by financial fraud? There are so many people out there who don't have the resources to fight back the way I did." Nina was quiet for a moment. "You want to turn your experience into something that helps other people?" "Exactly. I learned so much about investigating financial crimes, building legal cases, and protecting assets during divorce. Why shouldn't other people benefit from that knowledge?" The idea had been growing in Sophia's mind for months. She had been contacted by dozens of people who had read about her case in the media and wanted advice about their own situations. Many of them were women who suspected their husbands of financial infidelity but didn't know how to protect themselves or gather evidence. "I could offer consulting services," Sophia continued. "Help people document financial abuse, connect them with the right lawyers and investigators, provide emotional support during the legal process. Turn all of this pain into something positive." "That's brilliant, sophomore. You could probably help hundreds of people." After hanging up with Nina, Sophia opened her laptop and began researching the legal requirements for establishing a nonprofit organization. She had already chosen a name: the Sterling Foundation for Financial Justice. Another way to reclaim something Robert had tried to take from her. Her doorbell rang, interrupting her research. Through the security monitor, she saw a familiar face: Detective Park, holding a bouquet of flowers and smiling. "I brought you something," the detective said when Sophia opened the door. "A congratulations gift for officially closing this chapter of your life." They sat in Sophia's living room, drinking coffee and reflecting on the complex case that had brought them together. "You know, in 15 years of investigating financial crimes, I've never seen a victim become such an effective partner in building a case," Detective Park said. "Most people are too emotional or too traumatized to think strategically. You were different. I had good motivation. And good allies. Speaking of which, I have some news." Candace tried to appeal her sentence, claiming ineffective counsel. The appeal was denied this morning. Sophia felt a mild satisfaction at this news, but it didn't consume her the way updates about Robert and Candace once had. She had moved beyond needing their suffering to validate her own healing. "How are they adjusting to prison?" she asked, more out of curiosity than vindictiveness. "Robert is reportedly doing well in the white-collar facility where he's serving his time. He's teaching financial literacy classes to other inmates, which I find somewhat ironic. Candace is having a harder time. She's in a medium-security facility and apparently hasn't made many friends." They talked for another hour about the case, about the victims who had slowly rebuilt their lives, and about the changes in financial regulation that had resulted from the investigation. Sophia's story had become a cautionary tale that was being used to train financial advisors about ethical responsibilities and red flags for fraud. That afternoon, Sophia had lunch with Zara, who had become more than just a best friend during this ordeal. She had proven herself to be a brilliant investigator and a fierce advocate for justice. "I have something to show you," Zara said, pulling out her tablet. "Remember how I used my design skills to analyze Candace's social media? Well, I've been developing software that can help other people do similar investigations." The program Zara had created could analyze social media posts, financial transactions, and communication patterns to identify signs of deception or fraud. It was sophisticated enough to catch the kind of subtle clues that had helped expose Candace's multiple relationships. "This could revolutionize how people protect themselves from financial predators," Sophia said, studying the interface. "Would you be interested in partnering with me on the foundation?" "Absolutely. We make a good team." That evening, Sophia attended a support group meeting for people who had experienced financial betrayal in their marriages. She had been going to these meetings for 6 months, first as someone seeking healing and now as someone offering guidance to others. Tonight, a new member was sharing her story, a woman named Ashley whose husband had been gambling away their retirement savings while she believed he was investing it. The pain and confusion in Ashley's voice transported Sophia back to those first terrible days when she was discovering the extent of Robert's deception. "I don't know how to trust my own judgment anymore," Ashley said through tears. "If I couldn't tell that my husband was lying to me for 3 years, how can I trust myself to make any important decisions?" After the formal meeting ended, Sophia approached Ashley privately. "Can I tell you something? The fact that you were deceived doesn't say anything negative about your judgment. It says something negative about your husband's character. But there must have been signs I missed. Maybe. Or maybe he was just very good at lying. Either way, the important thing is what you do now that you know the truth." They talked for another 30 minutes, and Sophia shared some of the practical strategies she had learned about protecting assets and gathering evidence. By the end of their conversation, Ashley looked more hopeful than she had when the evening began. Walking back to her car, Sophia reflected on how much her life had changed in 12 months. The woman who had stumbled into her bedroom and discovered her husband's betrayal had been shattered by the revelation. She had felt naive, foolish, and completely unprepared for the battle that lay ahead. But that same woman had found strength she didn't know she possessed. She had outsmarted criminals, built a legal case that ensured justice for dozens of victims, and emerged from the destruction of her marriage as someone more powerful and independent than she had ever been before. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Miss Sterling, my name is Rachel Torres. I read about your case online and I think my husband might be doing something similar to what yours did. Could we talk?" Sophia smiled as she typed her response. "Of course. Let me know when you're available to meet. You're not alone in this." 6 months later, the Sterling Foundation for Financial Justice officially opened its doors. The nonprofit offered free consulting services to people suspected of being victims of financial fraud, connected them with qualified attorneys and investigators, and provided emotional support throughout the legal process. Sophia's story had come full circle. The betrayal that was meant to destroy her had instead become the foundation for helping hundreds of other people protect themselves and seek justice. Robert had tried to steal her future, but she had built a better one from the ashes of his deception. Standing in her office at the foundation, surrounded by case files of people she was helping and thank you letters from those who had found justice, Sophia finally understood what victory really meant. It wasn't about revenge or punishment, though those had their place. It wasn't about getting even or making someone suffer, though consequences were important. Victory was about refusing to let someone else's choices define your future. It was about taking the worst thing that had ever happened to you and transforming it into something that could help other people. Robert Sterling had tried to steal everything from his wife: her money, her trust, her sense of security, and her future. Instead, he had given her something far more valuable: the knowledge that she was strong enough to survive anything and wise enough to turn her pain into purpose. That was the kind of victory that lasted forever.